Back when space shooters and platformers used to rule the arcade space, there was this massive surge of games that didn't just cross the boundaries of action and gore, they just obliterated them. And today's video is a celebration of those games as we count down the top 12 ultra-violent classics that every retro gamer still dreams about. But before we get started, like this video and subscribe to our channel for more trips down memory lane. Now, let's break some bones. Chiller, 1986. Kicking off the list, we have the game that mastered the themes of gore and violence long before Mortal Kombat arrived on the scene. Chiller was a fever dream of pixelated carnage that pushed well beyond the boundaries of mainstream taste back in those days. And if you guys remember the game, we can all agree on that. Set in a series of dungeon-themed rooms, Chiller puts you in the shoes of an unseen torturer. Your job? Maim, mutilate, and murder a bunch of helpless souls chained to medieval torture devices. Yeah, it's as messed up as it sounds. The first two levels are a twisted playground of guillotines, racks, and other instruments of pain, with the challenge being how quickly you can turn these poor saps into red mist. Forget just shooting them, that's child's play. The real fun is finding the secret ways to activate the torture devices for maximum carnage. After these macabre opening levels, Chiller shifts tone somewhat, moving the action into a haunted house and graveyard. Here, the targets become the undead, zombies, ghosts, and mummies, offering a more familiar, if still grisly, shooting gallery experience. I mean, what really made this game infamous was its total lack of restraint. It was designed to shock, to provoke, and to push boundaries at a time when most games were still about jumping on turtles or saving princesses. Splatterhouse, 1988. Next up on our bone-crushing tour is Splatterhouse, a side-scrolling beat-em-up that casts players as Rick, a young man who, after a harrowing encounter at the West Mansion, finds himself possessed by a supernatural mask. And with this weird, eerie mask, Rick embarks on a quest to rescue his girlfriend from the clutches of the mansion's monstrous inhabitants. If we talk about the gameplay, it's all side-scrolling Brawler 101, but everything's dripping with gore here. You can smash heads with everything from planks to shotguns, and every enemy explodes into a satisfying splatter. The levels are a haunted house, a graveyard, a hellish dimension, basically every horror setting your inner goth ever dreamed of. If I remember correctly, it was one of the first games to wear its bloodshed like a badge of honor, and it paid the price. Banned in arcades, whispered about in schoolyards, and worshipped by horror fans. The controls are nowhere near compared to today's standards, but it's a cult classic that's still worth revisiting.
Let's go!
Narc, 1988. Developed by Williams Electronics, this game places you in the shoes of two undercover cops, Max Force and Hitman, tasked with dismantling a major drug cartel led by the enigmatic Mr. Big. The storyline is basically all the cop action movies back then, but living that cop life inside the arcade made it worth remembering. Players can choose to arrest enemies for extra points or, more commonly, dispatch them with an arsenal that includes machine guns and rocket launchers. The digitized sprites and detailed backgrounds set Narc apart at the time, which was rare for the late 1980s. Enemies explode into chunky pixels, and the screen is frequently awash with blood and chaos, a clear precursor to the ultra-violence that would define later titles like Mortal Kombat. Narc is perhaps most notable for pushing technical boundaries and helping pave the way for the digitized violence that would soon dominate arcades. Though some arcades hesitated to stock it, wary of controversy, it found a dedicated audience among players drawn to its shock value. Time Killers, 1992. This weapon-based fighter was an early attempt to cash in on the gore craze of the early 90s, and it was so wild that it's still remembered, for better or worse. Set within a tournament orchestrated by death, Time Killers assembles a roster of 8 fighters plucked from various historical and fictional periods. It featured characters like a caveman armed with a stone axe, a Viking wielding a battle axe, and a futuristic punk brandishing a chainsaw. The premise is simple. Each warrior battles for the promise of immortality, though the journey is anything but straightforward. Do you guys remember that distinct limb-based combat system? Rather than relying on traditional punch and kick commands, players control individual limbs: left arm, left leg, right leg, and even the head. If a limb is severed during combat, its corresponding function is lost for the remainder of the match. This turned matches into desperate struggles between maimed combatants, sometimes culminating in awkward, limbless duels that are as bizarre as they are memorable. The game's signature death moves allow players to decapitate or dismember opponents in a particularly brutal fashion, provided they can execute the correct button combinations. While these executions are visually shocking for their time, they also serve as a tongue-in-cheek nod to the era's fascination with over-the-top violence. I mean, while it may not have achieved the mainstream success of Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter, it remains a noteworthy arcade experiment. Mortal Kombat 1992. This was the game that brought violence and gore mainstream and established that video games were not only for kids. Moreover, the game also featured digitized actors, real people photographed and rendered as sprites, which made the action all the more real. And honestly, it was a huge deal back then. Here's a flashback of the plot if you guys don't remember. 7 warriors from Earth are summoned to a mysterious island to compete in a tournament that could determine the fate of the world. The characters are equipped with a set of special moves, executed through simple joystick and button combinations. I still remember pulling off my first fatality. Those over-the-top displays of violence, decapitations, immolations, and more became the stuff of legend, fueling playground rumors and arcade crowds alike. Mortal Kombat's legacy is undeniable. It was instrumental in sparking the debate over video game violence, ultimately leading to the creation of the ESRB rating system. The game's digitized graphics, secret characters, and its penchant for controversy really hardened its place in gaming history. While later entries in the franchise have refined the formula, the original Mortal Kombat remains a classic. Mortal Kombat 2, 1993. Okay, I finally decided to include this one as well on spot 6 after a lot of thinking, because nothing screams bone-crushing dismemberment as much as the Mortal Kombat franchise, and MK2 is the stuff of legend. A year after the gory success of Mortal Kombat, Midway created this sequel, which cranked up the carnage, the speed, and the sheer audacity of its predecessor, serving up a buffet of bone-crunching, digitized violence with a side of absurdity. The story picks up after the events of the first tournament with Shao Kahn, the Emperor of Outworld, eager to avenge his defeat. He invites Earth's warriors to a new contest, this time held within Outworld itself. The gameplay in Mortal Kombat 2 is noticeably faster and more fluid. The controls are tighter and combos are more intuitive, making the experience feel less like a novelty and more like a genuine fighting game. The addition of stage-specific fatalities and environmental hazards, such as acid pits and spike ceilings, further expands the tactical possibilities. Meanwhile, the introduction of friendships and babalities, quirky, non-lethal finishers, showcased a sense of humour that balanced the otherwise relentless violence. It's the entry that proved that Mortal Kombat wasn't just a one-hit wonder. Night Slashers 1993. If you take a final fight style beat 'em up and dunk it into a blender with every horror movie trope from the 80s and 90s, the result would be Night Slashers. The story here is straightforward. Earth has succumbed to an invasion of supernatural creatures, zombies, vampires, and werewolves among them, prompting three badass heroes to band together. Jake, a cyborg-enhanced American bounty hunter, Christopher, a European vampire hunter with a flair for the dramatic, and Zhao Honghua, an agile martial artist, form an unlikely alliance. Their mission is to thwart King Zarutz, a villain whose ambitions threaten to turn the world into a necrotic wasteland. Night Slashers stuck to the classic formula. Players progressed through a series of stages, dispatching hordes of enemies and confronting larger-than-life bosses. Its commitment to horror aesthetics and an impressive variety of character-specific moves was one of its biggest upsides. Night Slashers is perhaps most notable for its underappreciated status. Overshadowed by more mainstream titles, this one is worth revisiting. Samurai Shodown, 1993. This masterpiece turned fighting games into high-stakes chess matches, except the pieces are katana-wielding maniacs, and the board is soaked in Edo period blood. If you're thinking button-mashing chaos, let me tell you, this Neo Geo gem is all about tension, precision, and drama. Set in the late 18th century, the main villain, Amakusa, is a dude who got executed by the Tokugawa shogunate, made a deal with a demon, and came back to wreck Japan with dark magic. Naturally, a bunch of warriors team up to stop him, each with their own reasons for wanting a piece of Amakusa's evil hide. Gameplay here is a masterclass in restraint. Every swing of your blade carries weight. Miss, and you're leaving yourself wide open for a counterattack that could lop off half your health bar. The weapon clash system turns battles into psychological warfare. Lock blades with your opponent, mash buttons to overpower them, and watch their sword go flying. I think Samurai Shodown really had the audacity to be different compared to the rest. While everyone else was chasing Mortal Kombat's Gore, SNK crafted a fighter where strategy trumps speed, and every victory feels earned. It's the only title where losing your weapon mid-fight became a pulse-pounding mini-drama. Killer Instinct, 1994. Developed during the height of the arcade fighting boom, the story followed Ultratech, a shadowy corporation orchestrating a tournament to resurrect the ancient demon Idol. Players could select from a diverse roster, including Jago, a cybernetically enhanced monk, Glacius, an extraterrestrial entity with cryogenic abilities, and Spinal, an undead pirate warrior. While the premise borrowed familiar tournament fighter tropes, the execution elevates the material beyond its B-movie inspirations. Gameplay felt like violence conducted by a meth-addicted maestro. Rather than traditional round-based combat, Killer Instinct employs a dual life bar system that culminates in devastating ultra combos, extended juggle sequences that can exceed 30 hits. The revolutionary combo breaker mechanic introduced a psychological layer rarely seen in the genre, requiring players to predict and counter their opponent's attack patterns mid-sequence. I mean, this created moments of genuine tension where a single correct guess could completely reverse momentum. Looking back, I can say the game really pushed hardware limitations while maintaining that crisp visuals, and the iconic announcer commentary is still remembered to this day. Primal Rage, 1994. Since the arcade scene was already saturated with fighting games, Atari Games decided to create something new and different. And the result was Primal Rage, a game that masterfully took Mortal Kombat's Gore and created something never seen before. Set in a post-apocalyptic world where meteoric devastation has reduced civilization to rubble, the title presents a fascinating premise. 7 colossal beasts have emerged as gods, worshipped by primitive human tribes while battling for territorial supremacy over the newly christened Earth. Atari's bold decision to employ stop-motion animation using detailed clay models changed the arcade scene. This technique, reminiscent of Ray Harryhausen's classic monster films, gave each creature a tangible weight and presence that traditional sprite-based fighters couldn't match. The result was combat that felt visceral and weighty. I mean, the game's violence was notably uncompromising, even by 90s standards. Fatalities, termed domination moves, were unhinged and crazy. Perhaps most controversially, human worshippers scattered across each stage could be devoured mid-combat for health restoration, a mechanic that sparked considerable debate about gaming's moral boundaries. Sadly, despite technical innovations and striking visual design, Primal Rage struggled to maintain long-term relevance in an increasingly crowded market. Its planned sequel fell victim to development complications, leaving the original as a fascinating artifact of mid-90s arcade ambition.
BloodStorm.
BloodStorm, 1994. Incredible Technologies' follow-up to their controversial Time Killers represented an ambitious attempt to evolve the weapon-based fighting genre. Set against a post-apocalyptic backdrop where civilization has crumbled and warlords vie for supremacy, the game positions players as provincial rulers competing in a tournament following the High Emperor's assassination. BloodStorm's combat system refined the limb-severing mechanics of its predecessor while introducing the infamous Sunder technique, which bisected opponents at the waist, yet allowed them to continue fighting. The execution system received a Mortal Kombat-inspired overhaul, featuring input-based fatalities that invariably culminated in spectacular dismemberment sequences. The hidden roster of Agents of Necron bosses added replay value, while the weapon acquisition system gave players some tactical thinking to do. However, the game's extreme content positioning proved commercially limiting, drawing criticism from mainstream outlets. Entertainment Weekly notably dismissed it with a D grade, comparing it unfavourably to The Simpsons' parodies of fighting games. Yet it found its audience among gore-hungry arcade rats who appreciated its unhinged commitment to violence and surprisingly deep weapon-stealing mechanics. Mortal Kombat 3, 1995. Well, if you're thinking, Mortal Kombat again, let me tell you, we tried looking and nothing beats the unhinged Gorefest on spot number 12 than MK3. Departing from the mystical, otherworldly arenas of its predecessors, this installment thrust the brutal combat into a desolate, urban Earth realm. A completely different shift. The premise sees the Outworld Emperor, Shao Kahn, frustrated by his prior defeats, enacting a desperate gambit, the resurrection of his deceased queen, Sindel, directly upon Earth. This act shatters dimensional barriers, allowing Kahn to merge the realms and harvest the souls of Earth's populace, leaving only a handful of Raiden's chosen warriors to resist his extermination squads. This stark, apocalyptic backdrop framed a grittier conflict than fans had previously experienced. Gameplay got a major overhaul with the new run button and meter, letting you sprint toward opponents like a caffeinated ninja. Moreover, pre-programmed chain combos were implemented, making complex attack sequences more accessible, though some purists argued this diluted the skill ceiling. Interactive stage elements were expanded, allowing players to uppercut opponents through ceilings into different environments. The infamous fatality system was supplemented with animalities, transforming characters into beasts for a finishing blow. I feel like this game was still experimenting, even at the risk of alienating a portion of its fanbase. While perhaps not universally beloved at launch compared to its immediate predecessor, MK3 was a bold iteration in yesterday's standard. Marvelous verdict. And that's a wrap on our tour through 12 titans of ultra-violence. These games were cultural firestorms that crashed into arcades and living rooms, shaping our childhoods. Talk about Chiller's unhinged torture chambers, or Mortal Kombat's tournament that launched 1,000 parental complaints. These classics rewrote the rules of what gaming could be. So, which of these bone-crushing classics is your all-time favourite for its sheer, unadulterated carnage? Drop a comment below and let us know. And if you're hungry for more retro gaming madness, smash that like button and subscribe for more carnage-filled content just like this.